Welcome to the Spike Camp podcast. Spike Camp is a free online community for hunters that support conservation. It's a great place to share stories and your experience with other hunters. As a member of Spike Camp, you get access to all of our hunting live streams, discussion channels, contests, hunter resources, and events that we host. Membership to Spike Camp is free. Our only ask is that you are a member of a hunting or conservation group before you register. Head over to spikecamp.com to join us. This episode of the Spike Camp podcast is brought to you in part by Precision Optics. Omer and his team are the ones to trust when it comes to mountain hunting gear, guns, and optics. Precision Optics is a major supporter of conservation, and we are proud to partner with them. Head over to precisionoptics.net and tell them that Spike Camp sent you.
Tonight's guest is our good buddy Omer from Precision Optics. This week is super exciting. We are running a double header with Omer. I don't know if that could be taken in a couple different ways, but we're going to keep it clean for the show. Omer's sense of humor, if you have not experienced it yet, you need to stop in at Precision Optics in Quesnel on your way north. And yeah, you'll have a charge out of that visit. I always do. Anyway, buddy, it's great having you on. Tonight we're going to talk guns, and more specifically, we're going to talk about the 7mm Backcountry. So welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me. It was pretty exciting. It's been a while.
It's been a while, yeah. You were telling me earlier you guys had some weather today that you thought might be impacting internet service today, but we got through it, huh?
Yeah, the weather has been like my sense of humor, dark and off color. It's yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's been like sheet rain, sheet lightning, thunder. Really good for the dogs. You know how that is. They're running around panting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scared, terrified, freaking out. But it's exciting news from you this year. You're going to go on a sheep hunt. It's been a few
apparently. Yeah, apparently I actually have to go do some hunting. I feel like I've been a poser for the last 2 years because it's been 2 years since I went. I didn't go 23 and 24. I had good reason to not go in 23. 24 was just not being able to get away from work, but yeah, pretty stoked. Myself, Jackson, and my friend Ben, we're gonna fly out on the 31st and do some armed hiking and some armed camping.
Yep. So I have to ask, since you had your injury there, has that recovered 100%? Like, how are you feeling physically now? Because it's been a couple of years, you said, right?
Yeah, actually, it's like 2 years, pretty much to the week. I'll never be 100%. I wasn't 100% before, so I'm definitely not 100%. But I mean, gravity sucks. I'm a pretty stubborn person, but gravity kind of had its way, and you do the best you can. When you're half a century plus, there is no getting into sheep shape. There is trying to maintain sheep shape. But it's been a long climb. Right around this time last year, I was hovering around 180 pounds, and I'm 6'3" and a little bit, so that's pretty skinny. Funnily enough, there was a BMI index that said I was just right. I looked like I was dying of what. And didn't, eating potato chips, but I was just right on the BMI index.
Perfect.
But I have a lot of customers, and it's great when they call you and bug you and text you for gun and optic and hunting info, and then you're like, hey, I know that guy. He's jacked as fuck. He's always in wicked shape. I'm gonna start bugging that guy.
Get some return. Yeah, exactly.
So actually, a great guy by the name of Kevin Thorne, who's a real specimen of a human being, I started bugging him, and I don't know how, I think that I'm a fairly fast texter.
Mm-hmm.
But you ever have that person where you're like, hey, what do you think of so-and-so? And like 5 seconds, like, bleh, you get like a scroll that's like a few pages, right? Well, that was him with supplements and fitness, and I followed everything that he did. And and I'm 207 pounds now. So I'm not quite at the sheep shape I'd like to be. Prime, we can talk about this next time, but I used to run. That's what I did. I ran, at least 3 days a week, you know, round the year, like 12 months out of the year. And so, you know, that gave you that huge cardio tank, which is probably the most important thing. And then I would do some basic stuff. Now it's a little bit different. I can't run, so I do things. But to answer your question, certainly a lot better than I was a year ago. Do I feel like the hunt that we have planned is pretty rigorous? There's a lot of ground to cover, like a lot of ground. But we're just going to do the best we can. I mean, it's just being there too. It'll be my first sheep hunt with Jack, so that'll be an eye opener for him. Ben and I have done a few sheep hunts and goat hunts together, so some really grueling goat hunts. So I know what he's made of. I know that he can handle anything that comes his way. But you know, got to see what Jackson's made of. Got to see what he can handle. So he'll be fine. He's actually a bit of a specimen himself. He's been working out pretty hard. Looks pretty impressive with his shirt off. Young fucker.
They all do.
all that testosterone.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's got to be exciting for him when you think about it, right? I mean, he lives and breathes hunting, and he's around that hardcore sheep hunting space all the time. So he hears and he sees, and you know, it's all that. So I'm excited for him. We'll get both of you guys back on, because I want to hear his version of hunting with Omer, and I want to hear Omer's version of hunting with his son. So I think that'd be an awesome show. So we'll get that one on the calendar when you guys get back. So
maybe because he'll be correcting me everything I say. He'll like, yeah, Dad, that's bullshit. No, Dad, that's not how it went. You know, Dad, stop. Right.
This is why I want to get him on.
Yeah.
I think it'll be awesome. All right. Well, we're gonna get into the nuts and bolts of sheep hunting in a couple nights here. So let's dig into it. So
sure.
I have some questions before we dig into the weeds on the 7 Backcountry.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you first heard about this, you know, new caliber concept, I guess, technology, what were your initial thoughts when you first heard, you know, like 80,000 PSI, blah, 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 next to your face? I mean, what jumped into your mind, first thoughts?
Honestly, raw. So before I even heard the specs, I heard 7MM Backcountry by Federal, and I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, really? Like, we need this. Like, we need an asshole right here. Like, it's just, you're like, look it. We've just spent about 24 months now selling the bejesus out of the 7MM PRC, right? And like, we do this over and over and over again. And like, some of them are like the PRCs. Hey, it's somewhere in the forums, somewhere on Hunting BC in Facebook, where, and I don't know who the guy was, but some guy's like, what do you think about the 7 or 6.5 PRC? And I was like, fuck no. Like, we don't need another 6.5. Well, you know,
look what happened.
Here we go. So I was totally like really, like, you know, like gangster, arms crossed, like, really, Holmes, like, we need this. And then I looked into it, and then you know, we were hearing about it, you know, like the shooting, the actual performance of it, like April, May of last year. Okay. So we were like way out from it. Like, it was way out. They were talking about it. A certain brand that isn't producing it right now for their own reasons. But, and then, you know, and Jackson is texting with this one rep, and, you know, we're back and forth, and he's telling us the velocities and the accuracy and the barrel lengths. And we're just like, holy shit, really? You know? And then John at Fierce started really spilling the beans to me, because we're his biggest dealer up here, and he knows, like, I'm all in all the time on certain things. And so, you know, I did start doing my diligence on it, and then talking to as many gun manufacturers that were shooting it as possible. And then I was like, okay, you know, for various reasons that we'll get into, I was like, okay, this is legit. It ticks off so many boxes. But at the same time, you know, the frustrating thing about it, and, you know, John did a podcast on it a while ago. You know, and there's some reasons why you don't need to bother. Okay. So, I mean, if you want to dive, I mean, so that was it in a nutshell. I was
Yeah.
like, fuck no, maybe, and then fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Once you
in
see the performance, yeah.
short order, and pardon
Mhm.
my language, but that's just how I speak.
Yeah.
So at this stage, we've shot quite a few of them, and we're going to get into the nuts and bolts in terms of the anecdotal observations of shooting them, and then some of just the cold hard math, and go through the pros and cons. And I feel that the caliber does need a bit of attention, because this year in particular is not a typical year, and not an optimal one for a company to be introducing a brand new caliber that has bona fide benefits to those who adopt it. And that has a little bit to do with the overall economy, especially here in Canada. More specifically, the presence of the countervailing 25% tariff is a serious impediment on both firearms of certain brands, or like virtually every brand other than Fierce, and the cost and availability of ammunition.
Mhm.
And ammunition is the most critical thing when it comes to like any caliber, particularly this one. So we'll talk about that too.
Okay. All right. Well, you know what? I've learned this before in discussions with you, and I am just going to simply turn the floor over to you, and I will jump in with questions, comments, etc. as we go, because I've got a list, but I know you're very prepped. So,
Well, go ahead, like hit me with a couple things, and that'll probably lead to some interesting rabbit
okay,
holes.
sure. So, initial thoughts, you gave us that. I guess I'll give you my initial thoughts because they were similar, right? And as you know, and many of the folks on here know, I'm a hand loader, kind of to the
Mhm.
bone, and you cater to anybody and everybody in the firearm space and hunting space. So you have good inventories of factory ammunition. You do carry components. You do all that stuff. You got Garrick, who's a big your hand loader guy. So I know
Yeah.
he's in one side extreme on kind of on the spectrum, and I'm on that same side. And I looked at the 7 Backcountry, and two thoughts jumped into my head right out of the gate. First one was, holy shit, there's a lot going on beside your face, with all that PSI. Like
Yeah.
this has to be proven, and I'm sure it has, or they would have not been able to launch it. So for me, it was like, wow. The second thought was, I guess I had two or three thoughts, but second thought was, would a person be able to hand load for this at some point? Because traditionally with factory ammunition, it's relatively safe and it's SAMI standards and specs, so it's well below maximum PSIs. So if they're launching something with this kind of pressure and velocity, what are the potentials for hand loading on the good side and the bad side? So for
Mhm.
me, that was an interesting sort of first thought. And then second thought that jumped into my head was, what's coming next? Because this is standard bolt face. There's just like there's rechambering option or rebarreling options out there if people want to go that route. Two gunsmiths that I know that are good friends of mine were immediately on the horn ordering reamers, and we've had a
Yeah.
few guys already launching customs. So
Yep.
yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, I guess my one question would be, what's the demographic for this caliber? What do you see? Like who's going to really be benefit from buying this caliber in your mind? Where's the market?
So, yeah. So to preface, in all of our discussions in terms of performance, and especially when we get into the direct comparisons to similar built systems in different calibers, we're strictly talking about factory available ammunition.
Okay.
When people look at the projectiles and the numbers that we're going to put up, bear in mind this is based on factory ammunition, not hand loads. When you hand load skillfully, you are able to bend the curve. Okay, you're able to cheat things. You can get performance out of calibers that at a factory level you wouldn't think is, I don't want to say possible because that's a bit hyperbolic, but you can definitely push caliber A much closer to caliber B that has a much bigger case capacity and its resident factory load. Okay, so that has to be said. So hand loaders, you guys rule, and none of this really applies to you. Okay, because you guys can get what you want how you want it. So my methodology with like systems, like rifle systems, and that is a whole different concept than just a gun and a scope. It's a system that works together to achieve a goal. But my objective has always been factory rifle, factory ammunition, find a compatible load with the harmonics of that barrel, and then plot the ballistics for it so that you get a system that works together, so that I can take any gun. I can take, like $1,000 Tika, if Tika's only worth $1,000, but let's say a $1,500 Tika now, and like a quality, entry-level scope. And with enough ammunition and trial, we can find something that shoots well sub MOA, and then, get you a yardage turret for your scope, or program a ballistic compensating rangefinder, with the goal, okay, the objective being, to give you the equivalent of like a Gunworks package, like 1,000 yards out of the box. Okay.
So this is your dialed in program that you guys do for anybody and any gun, right? Basically.
Yeah, correct. So it's based on factory ammunition that's more easily replicable than hand loads. Now we also do hand loads for systems. Garrick takes over that. He handles that. But again, for the average guy who is very enthusiastic about the sport and hunting, he may be incredibly passionate about hunting. Okay. He just doesn't have the time to hand load. Or he's one of those guys, he's like, hey, listen, you know what, Omer, like, I'm fascinated by all that, but I spend enough time, just being away from my family on the hunt and the few weekends to sort of get things set up. I can't hand load, man. I can't. And then he's like, they're like, man, there's just too much stuff. Like which dies, which press, which scale, I don't know. How do I get prime? Like, I don't know how to do that. I'm like, okay, that's fine. We set up your system and you buy 5 boxes, 10 boxes, 20 boxes, whatever it is, whatever you're comfortable with for this system. And away you go. Okay. Yeah. Now someone like yourself, here's a very accomplished hand loader, right? I look what you're getting out of your, we're going to, yeah. I mean, look what you're doing with it, right? I mean, it's really, it's going to fall right in line with what the backcountry's doing. Okay. So again, for anyone, I don't want to upset them by showing numbers. You're gonna be like, oh, fuck you, Omer. You're just picking and choosing. Like, no, we're not. We have hundreds and hundreds of rifles that have been through the dial-in system in various configurations. And, the data that we extract is real, right? Yeah. I just took some, fairly recent dial-ins to use as comparatives. So that's the premise: factory gun, and in particular factory ammunition. Okay, so
before we jump a little bit ahead, just a quick question then. There's been some sort of loose discussions in the industry that the ability to hand load for this is coming.
It is.
Do you have any idea? Like, is that starting to get closer?
Yeah. So what I've been told is that RCBS has developed dies and they put them in the hands of testers. And, what I've been told is it's a 3-step process.
Okay.
Right. Which makes sense when you think about the case that you're using. Now, like Garrick, as always, ruins everything. Okay. Because he's such a realist. He's like, yeah, that's great. That's great. What fucking powder are they using and how are we going to get it?
Yeah.
Right.
There's that. Yeah, there's that for sure.
The component side, and I don't think you're going to get a lot of life out of it. I think you're going to get maybe 2, 3. I mean, people are seeing some pretty heavy duty neck stress on the first firing, which 80 plus K PSI is going to do that, right? But it's coming, and Federal's not exactly a small company. They're kind of the biggest ammo manufacturer out there. They understand that reloaders are like a very, very important, if not one of the most important markets. So they're going to lean into that. Their objective right now is to get as much ammo out there as possible to keep these beasts fed,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because there are calibers that are good on paper. The whole Nosler family, 22, 27, or 26, 27, 28, 30, 33 Nosler. And even though some of them were phenomenal and still exist and still are, they died on the vine because the Nosler tree during COVID just couldn't get ammo out. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And those calibers choked off, just like other great ones like 325 Wisdom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here in Quesnel, there's all these guys in a certain age bracket. They all got 325 Wisdoms because that was the shit back then, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think about the 6.8 Western.
What happened to that? Yeah.
I've shot a few of
Mhm.
them, and I'll tell you, like ballistically, it's very impressive, and the recoil is quite nice. But it was introduced at a time when there wasn't a lot of ammo for it, partially because of COVID. And now, even though it's a great caliber, honestly, there's just very little to feed it.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in that space now. Why? Like, there's no question that the Hornady marketing machine is pretty much second to none.
Yeah.
Federal, on the other hand, is a huge company, like a multi-billion-dollar ammo manufacturer. And what they've developed here is, it's not new science, but it's rejuvenated science. Like peak alloy steel cases have been around for a while. SIG has been messing around with, I shouldn't say messing, has been experimenting with it and then developing it, like in the 277 Fury, to achieve insane velocities, right? And that's what this does. And, to reveal a little bit, like the plan is to have a series of these. Okay, so down the line, you're going to see a 300, a 6.5, probably a 22. And I know a lot of people would be really excited to see a 338 backcountry.
Yeah.
So imagine like a 16 and a half, 18 and a half inch barreled 338 that launches like a 250 grain AccuBond at 2850 with less recoil, right? Or a 6.5 that is like 3,500 feet per second, which is what the 26 Nosler was supposed to have done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Again, with a different recoil pulse. And we're going to talk about that because that's probably one of the most important things about this caliber is the recoil pulse.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah. I think, just summarizing that, if you look at the world of hand loaders / reloading, if you dive into that camp, you talked about a bit about the, hunters that just don't have time, and life is life, man. You're busy, and I get it. Like, just the load development process that I just went through. And for me, that is like a passion. So I love doing it. Like, I'll take the time, but to get to where I'm at with that little 284 Winchester, there's 200 rounds through that. And that's hand built ammunition and all the case prep. So there's reloaders and there's hand loaders. And I think if you're going to maximize potential out of a caliber by virtue of doing it yourself, you need to be a hand loader to really go through it. Some guys just load, just to get cheap ammo, but hand loading's not cheap. I don't care what anybody says. It's not. Like, if you would do the math on your time and the money spent on componentry and everything else, it's not. So for me, I see this as, like, if I was a hunter, we'll summarize later, but if I was a hunter who's very, like you said, ready to invest, ready to get into it, going to do, let's say you're doing like Blake, for example. Blake's he's not a hand loader, and luckily he's got one in the family. But in his case, here's his hunting plans for the year. He got a goat draw, he's got a moose draw, and he wants to kill all 3 species of deer that walk in BC in 1 year. And if he said, Dad, what's the perfect gun for all of that? Well, I would look at someone like him and say, well, this 7 Backcountry might check your box because it'll kill anything on the planet, small to large, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting. So I would agree. I think that's the marketplace, and as for hand loading, we'll just have to see what happens. I would be personally, I'd be a little nervous hand loading for it, just because there's so much going on there.
Yeah, I mean, the case pressure, gives a bit of pause, of course, when you're looking at Sammy Max's typically they're in the low 60,000 zone, right?
Yeah.
This is like 80K, like 80,000. So a full third, like 33% more.
Yeah.
33% more is like, that's a lot. Like if you walked into your boss's office and he's just like, I'm giving you a raise, and you're like, how much? And you're like, 33% more. Well, shit, you're gonna kiss him, right?
Hell yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So that's what you. But if someone said, the opposite, like, oh, geez, fuel's gonna go up 33%, you're gonna be like, I'm fucking walking, right?
Yeah.
So some things are good, some things are bad. Interesting enough, there are a couple of brands of rifles out there that apparently there are releases whereby they say that our action is not to be used to produce a 7MM Backcountry because they haven't tested it.
Mhm.
Now, my understanding, and I'm sure someone can correct me, but my understanding is that conventional firearms, like if you sell a center fire, that the firearm is tested to around 200,000. Like that's what they're capable of withstanding. Some more,
Mhm.
some less, right? But roughly triple. Like what somebody has done is like taken, looked at most of the powders that are available in most of the case sizes and kind of done some math and said, okay, if so and so takes this powder and puts it in this case, what's going to happen? That being said, I've seen with my own eyes what happens when the wrong powder is in the wrong case. Okay.
So
And yeah, I mean, not to get down too many rabbit holes, but I was visiting Andy, and Andy's our local gunsmith and one of the best gunsmiths in Canada. And he holds up, he's like, have a look at that. And I'm looking at his bench, and there in the vise is like, I see the barrel, and then I see the action, and I see the name of a really well-known custom manufacturer. And I'm like, what the fuck is that? And it's like the firing pin is like sticking out of the action. And then he's holding up like, which kind of grisly, but he's holding up like the bolt knob and the whole back shroud of the bolt. And so the lugs and the front part of the bolt were still in the action. And what happened was this gentleman has a custom 284, 6.5 by 284.
Mm-hmm.
And he was using Reloader 26, which any hand loader knows that Reloader 26 is now, it's not available to us. And so it's a bit of a unicorn, and a lot of people wean themselves off by moving to like Vietavori powders or something. But this gentleman was looking around for more Reloader 26 and saw some for sale on an auction site, and it said it was, open can. So he bought it and used it. And unfortunately, it was not Reloader 26. It was obviously a much faster burning powder. And it literally blew the back of the bolt body like completely off, sheared the bolt knob off, and fortunately the gentleman is alive and he's back shooting.
Oh shit.
But it was terrible. But that just shows you what we're dealing with. Okay, like
yeah, exactly.
you always have to remind yourself what we're dealing with. So I never give short answers except when I'm being questioned by the police. But
yeah,
the point is that we're dealing with very, very high pressures. Now it's been tested for a long time.
Yeah,
and
it's
the
not
whole
new.
and the whole dynamics of the steel case allows this, plain and simple.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, let's jump in. Do you want to start walking through the ballistics and stuff? What do you want to do now?
Yeah. So okay. So what is the actual appeal of the 7MM Backcountry? Like, why bother? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Quite simply, it's two things. I've distilled it to two things. Number one, it is a meaningful increase in velocity with a given projectile over any other caliber with factory ammunition. Like, it's substantial. Okay, so an aside to that. Okay, well, the Weatherby days are over, right? We've been saying that for a long time. Velocity isn't as important. Flatness isn't as important anymore because we have very reliable and accurate ballistic compensation, right?
Mhm.
So it doesn't matter what your velo is, as long as you have a sound ballistic engine and you know what you're doing, and you have the holy trinity of ballistics, grain, ballistic coefficient, and velocity. You know, you can plot where that bullet's going to be at any given second and point in time. Okay, and then we have, again, very reliable rangefinders. You know, very good etching capabilities. So velocity is not what it used to be, right? However,
Mm.
this isn't a little bit. This is a significant jump in velocity. So it allows you to do some interesting things. Okay, it allows you to use certain projectiles in very short barrels, because that's been the other thing. There's been a huge trend popped up about 4 years ago, and it started on the US side where they were running cans so they could get away with shorter barrels. And then pretty soon you get someone up here in Kazakhstan who holds one of these guns. I'm like, oh my God, this thing's lighter and it points so much easier, you know? So then, you know, then we started moving very quickly from 26-inch barrels, 24, to now more than 50% of our guns, like way more than that we sell, are 20 or 22-inch barrels. Okay.
Sure.
But with that came a decrease in velocity. Again, you know, not a tragic decrease in velocity, not to the point where, you know, it's not usable, but you do have to be mindful of the foot-pounds and velocity as you get out there. You're going to hit it. You're going to hit what you aim at if you do things correctly and you can shoot, you know, but what's going to happen when it hits the target? Okay. Well, the backcountry moves that bar up significantly. Okay. Now, the second thing is really what pushed me to feel that this is legitimate. So I kept talking to people, and, you know, I have a little bit of like, okay, I'll believe it when I see it in me. And I'm hearing from these guys like, yeah, man, like the recoil is like, you know, it's manageable. The recoil pulse is totally different. Like, okay, sure. So then sitting there talking to Garrick, and Garrick is an engineer, and he's just like, and I agree. I'm just like, he's like, there's no free lunch, and you know that, right?
Sure. Yeah. It's
Like
got to be something.
you got slider bars. You know, you crank this one up, and then this is going to affect you over here. It's just like with guns. You up the recoil, you down the weight. Sorry, you up the caliber, you decrease the weight. What happens? Boom, the recoil feels harsher, right? The muzzle, you shorten that barrel and increase the caliber. Boom, you get muzzle rise. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really skeptical. And I remember we were at the sheep show and people were coming up and asking me about the backcountry. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, if I pull that trigger and I lose sight picture and it's unmanageable, me personally, I'm not very interested. Because, you know, I'll sell whatever you want within reason. I won't let people put together something that's aberrative. It's got to be, you know, it's got to be sane, right? I won't just take their money. But I also have my ideals of what I like a system to be, right? It delivers ethical energy downrange at a given parameter of distance, and it's manageable to shoot. Okay. And that comes from like an archery background, and then from an solo alpine hunting background, where, you know, I need to pull the trigger and at least have some semblance of sight picture retention so I can see what just happened or didn't happen. Okay. So it's like, okay, if the recoil is manageable, okay, I'm in. If it's not, I'm not as interested. Okay, I'm just not. I'll support it, but I'm just not.
Mm-hmm.
And the 7MM PRC does those things quite nicely. Okay, it's you know, we got the recoil numbers coming up here, but the felt recoil is really quite decent given, you know, what you're launching downrange. So, you know, I'm like, there has to be a serious performance pickup. So, you know, this culminated in getting the very first backcountry in our hands, which was the Wild Sheep Magnificent 7 Rides Again donation rifle. It's a fierce twisted rogue with a Zeiss Conquest V4 4-16. It's actually, I believe, the early bird prize, which would be drawn in a month or so. But it's a twisted rogue. The whole package was 7 pounds 13 ounces. And my good friend and savior Don Lynham, who is, you know, if you know Don, you love him. If you don't know him, you're missing out. he managed to get me a couple of boxes, 175 Fusion, before anybody had it, of course.
Kind of
right?
ironic, eh? That Don could get them.
Oh yeah, no,
It's
well,
just
not
Johnny,
really,
right? No.
not really. I mean, he is a true lover of all things firearms, and he's got
Oh,
his
yeah.
ways. But so we got the ammo up here, and I sent a couple pictures, and then the scope was all scoped up, or the rifle was all set up and everything. And so I got the 2 boxes of ammo, and I sent a picture to Andy, Andy did not order a reamer. He's literally sitting this one out.
Yeah.
So I sent him a text, showed him the picture. He's like, "Oh wow, who gets to pull the trigger?" And I was like, "The string," as I hide underneath the concrete shooting table. And he's like, "LOL," like, yeah, exactly, right? So anyway, really a wonderful lady that works for me. Her husband is like just a crazy gunny, but he's into like really exotic, kind of wild cats and stuff that you can't find ammo for. But he was really curious. And so I told his wife, I said, "Well, we're going to be at the range at this time, just tell him." He's a really busy guy, and they have a huge family. There's like just an amazing, like wonderful, huge family they have. And I was just like, and boom, there he is. So it's me, Jackson, and him, and he's like excited, right? And he's a great big ex-rodeoer, So I shot it. So all this lead up, and I like get behind it, and I'm shooting it at 100 yards, and I'm chronographing it. And on the drive there, I go to Jackson. I'm like, and it's a 20-inch barreled rifle. I'm like, yeah, it ain't gonna break 3K. Jackson's like, yeah, it'll break 3,000. Dad. I'm like, fuck no, it won't. I'm like, you want to bet? He's like, no, I'm not gonna bet you money, but it's gonna break 3,000, right? Well, Jackson already knew because he's been talking to like a few guys like deep in the industry, right? He's like, he's got the goods. But I just wanted to have a bit of banter. Anyway, I get behind the gun and I am like super tense. Kind of like your first kiss. You're like, oh God, what's going to happen? What do I do? And I pull the trigger and I was like, oh man, that was nothing. And what was more interesting, I was looking through the scope and I actually saw dirt fly behind the target. So I was like, okay. And then Raven's in his deep voice, like, how was it? And I'm like, that was nothing. So I quickly did 2 more. And I was like, okay, this is pretty nice to shoot, actually, considering what's going on here. So then he shot one because we wanted to do a string of 5 for velocity. And he's like, wow, that was really nice. Like, that's not what I expected at all. Anyway, it culminated in the 5-shot velocity with the 175 Fusion was just under 3,030. It was like 3,028 or 27 or something like that. And then we proceeded to shoot. I did the ballistics, and we started to shoot at 500 meters. And me, Jackson, and Raven all shot it. And we're watching it hit the gongs, no problem.
So, Omer, what if you were to draw a comparison to another caliber, any other caliber, does it remind you of any other gun, any other caliber choice? Like, is it 6.5 Creedmoor recoil, or where would you place it?
So Garrick would say it's like a 7 PRC. It's like a 7 PRC. Okay. And I would say it's actually not. The big difference is the recoil pulse. Okay. So foot-pounds of energy, it's similar. It's right there with the 7 PRC. It's not, it's not more, and it didn't measure more. But the recoil pulse is quite different. Now, what do I mean by recoil pulse? Okay. So you know how you got different types of guns and they recoil differently? Like, you shoot like a 300 Rum and you shoot a 300 Weatherby Magnum. So the 300 Rum has like, boom, it's got a strong recoil cycle from the moment you pull the trigger to how there's a bit of muzzle jump to like the push, but it's not as snappy and sharp as like a 300 Weatherby. Yeah. Okay, like a Weatherby caliber tends to have like a sharp, kind of like a jabby, kind of punchy recoil. And that goes on. You can get like a 45-70, like a straight neck kind of lever action. Whereas you get a similar grain bullet in a neck down caliber, and the recoil feels totally different. You can have the same grain, but you have different powder and different necks and different reverberation and pressure because of the case.
Yeah.
So what I would say about the 7MM Backcountry, and then, you know, having analyzed it and talked to people, so it generates massive thrust, very violent thrust to push that bullet down the barrel faster in a non-magnum case. So to be clear, the case is essentially a 30-06 case. Okay. Let's for simplicity's sake, let's call it a neck down 30-06. It's a standard bolt face, long action, non-magnum. Okay. But it generates thrust that you're going to see that is superior to a 28 Nosler, which is like an ultra mag case, like a 300 rum neck down to a 284. But the way it feels is it literally pushes the gun straight back so violently that the gun doesn't jump or jumps very little. So the impression, and if you read about it, a lot of people will say the same thing. The felt recoil, the recoil experience is certainly less than a Magnum, but less than other similar calibers, meaning straight, non-Magnum, long action, standard bolt face calibers, because you're not losing sight picture. There's a big difference when the gun comes back like this and your scope allows you to still sort of see what's in your sight picture versus this.
Yeah, exactly.
We've all had guns like that. You pull the trigger, it's like, boom. What happened, coach? Did I get him?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Where was that? Yeah.
You don't get that in this caliber. Now, again, caveat, this is with a muzzle brake.
Which, in all honesty, though, I mean, how many rifles are you selling out the door today that don't have a brake, right?
Well, we do get
most of
it. They all, yeah, I mean, almost every gun has a muzzle brake because, again, increase the caliber, reduce the weight, increase the recoil, have to mitigate the recoil, put the muzzle brake on. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's a big trade-off.
But there are people that don't want a muzzle brake.
Yeah.
Now, we have not shot one without a muzzle brake because, quite frankly, we're not blasting ammo for no good reason. But when someone orders one without a muzzle brake, then I guess we're gonna have to test it, and I'm sure it's gonna be pretty punky. But objectively, numerically, empirically, you know, it has considerably less recoil and less recoil energy than a Magnum, and it outperforms any Magnum, to be clear. And not by a small bit, by a lot.
Yeah, I mean, as a hand loader, I'm sitting here listening to this and I'm thinking, what powder are they putting in this thing? I'm with Garrick on this. Like, what is the fairy dust that's inside that case? Because that's going to have something to do with that. Or it's a very popular powder and they're putting as much as they possibly can in there, one or the other, which would be interesting. I mean, I'd love to see data on that.
Oh yeah, it'll come out.
Yeah, interesting.
So I mean, may as well jump into some numbers.
Sure. So do you want Blake to pull those charts up?
Yeah, bring up the 168 comparison.
Okay, he's going to do the share screen thing here.
Okay, so that's a whole lot of shit in your eye there, but we're going to break it down bit by bit. Okay, so what did I do here? So what I did was, if you look at the top, we have 3 different rifles. We got a Fierce Rogue, a Carbon Rogue, so non-titanium version. Then we got a Gunworks Climber in 7 SOM and a Gunworks Climber in 7 Rem Mag. All 3 rifles have 20-inch barrels. All 3 rifles are shooting a 168 grain bullet. So the Backcountry is shooting their factory 168 LRX, and the Gunworks 7 SOM and 7 Rem Mag are both shooting the Gunworks Factory 168 BLD, which it tends to be on the hotter side. So let's consider it to be kind of a quality hand load. But
Okay.
you know, in an effort to keep the grain the same and the barrel the same, you know, these were the 7s that I had to compare, because, you know, you don't have any other 7 SOM ammo in a 168 other than the Gunworks. And there is a Federal Premium load with a 168 Burger hybrid, but we've never tested it in a 20-inch 7 Rem Mag. Okay. So again, these are all 7s, 7 Backcountry, 7 SOM, 7 Rem Mag. They all have 20-inch barrels. They're comparable weights. The Backcountry's the heaviest at 7 pounds 11 ounces. The RSOM, the 7 SOM, is the lightest at 7 pounds 6 ounces, and the Rem Mag is in between them at 7 pounds 9 ounces. So 5 ounces separating them from the top and bottom. Okay. Now look at the velocities. So the Backcountry posted 3,058 feet per second with that 20-inch barrel. The 7 SOM, 2785 with a 168 BLD, and the 7 Rem Mag, 2657.
I'll just jump in for a second. That those velocities for factory ammo on the 7 SOM and the 7 Rem Mag, those are pretty hot. That's just a comment. They're just looking at that stuff is cooking for factory ammo. And
Out of
then
a 20-inch?
also
Yeah.
out of a 20-inch, yeah. And then you look at your you're looking at the BC numbers on the Burger bullets is a little higher than the Barnes too.
Considerably.
So it should be interesting. Yeah, considerably when you look. I'm curious downrange. So anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
And so, you know, there are going to be some interesting observations here where we have, you know, the Backcountries have notably higher velocity, but, you know, some of the bullets that are being used in these other calibers that we use have high BCs, and you're going to see how that plays out. But look, there is no question. Okay. Look at the velocity difference.
Oh yeah, it's
like
big.
look at the difference between the 7 Rem and the 7 Backcountry. And the 7 Rem's got a hot load, right? Now, again, people have often noticed this, like when they're looking at Gunworks packages that, you know, normally we have a lot of them. They'll compare the turrets, because we photographed Jackson's meticulous. He shows the turrets, and you'll have a 7 SOM and a 7 Rem, both using the same projectile. And the turret caps, people are like, that can't be right. Is that right? Is that like the SOM's faster? I'm like, well, yeah, it is. Yeah, that case is fantastic. Like, these are real numbers, and they're consistent. Like, we've done lots of, you know, 7 SOMs that are 20 inchers. Not as many 7 Rem Mags, but people do ask for them. So these are real numbers. And that number, that 3058 out of that Rogue, like, I would say that's a slower barrel for a Backcountry, because 20-inch barrel velocities, a lot of people have recorded stuff very close to 3,100 feet per second. Okay, so now here's another interesting thing. So see that bottom line, recoil foot-pounds?
Yeah.
Okay. Look at the Backcountry compared to the Rem Mag.
Yeah, we're talking a couple of pounds. And for those that don't know, that a couple of pounds is a dramatic difference.
It matters. Yeah, it certainly matters, you know.
Yeah.
You know, these numbers are derived from a number of sources. It's not easy to get reliable data on this, but it's an amalgam of numbers for what was available, but they are fairly accurate. You know, again, like, look at that 7 SOM. You know, this is the reason, you know, aside from the Backcountry, the 7 SOM is I consider it to be probably the best 7mm there is, but it just, you know, it is kind of a very selective caliber. You got a hand loader, you got to shoot $220 boxes of ammo, but look at the recoil on that thing. As a comparative, a 280 Ackley is between 19 and 20 foot-pounds of felt recoil. But anyway, there's no question you have a pretty dramatic increase in velocity given the same barrel length and projectile weight. So now let's look downrange. So let's look at 500 yards. Well, no shit, right? Like, of course, the backcountry is going to have more foot-pounds of energy, right?
Yeah.
It also has considerably less drop, and it's more efficient. So if you look at, across that yellow line, you'll see the velocity, then you'll see the energy, you'll see the drop in inches, and then you'll see the required dial up in MOA. And, moving across, you'll see that the 7RM mag has dropped off significantly. It's 10 inches lower, and it's 100 and just about 300 less foot-pounds of energy, right? At 750,
you can scroll up there, yeah.
At 750, you can see that they're really, again, the difference between the 7RM and the backcountry is pretty significant. But here's where ballistic coefficient matters. Look at the SOM. The SOM is right with it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that higher BC and a reasonable velocity gives you comparable performance. But look, there is a huge difference here. Maybe at some point we'll have a VLD load for the backcountry. But this is a monolithic copper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And without getting involved in the differences and nuances in projectile types, I can tell you that there are quite a few people that would rather pack a monolithic copper right now, just given what we know about frangibles and their performance. And so that comes to bear, right? If you're walking around and you got to take that long shot, but you want that monolithic copper to shoot an animal in the shoulder without having unpredictable fragmentation, that matters to some people. Now, when you trail down the foot-pounds, you'll see like at about 850 for the backcountry, you hit around 1,000, and 1640 in Velo. So both it and the RSOM are kind of in the same zone with their respective projectiles, but that 7RM mag is kind of dropped below what some consider to be the ethical line. And then when you hit 1,000, all three of them have dropped below what I would consider to be like, you'll hit it. You run into the, oh yeah, you'll hit it, but what's going to happen when you do stage? But and at this point, that 7 SOM has pulled ahead with the 168 BLD because of the nature of burger bullets and high BCs.
Sure. But I think, if you were to just looking at some of the data here, that's interesting. The MOA dial-ups with the backcountry are pretty impressive too, right? When you look at your ranges, the different ranges, like 700 yards, you've only got 13. That's a substantial amount when you get out there. So flat, it's unbelievable. It would be really interesting to see, and this is one of the questions I want to get into in a little bit, but where you think factory bullet offerings are going to go, but we'll come back to that.
The other thing to really look at that I like is if you look up at 300.
Okay, scroll back.
With a 200-yard zero.
Yeah. Oh shit. Yeah.
Yeah, that backcountry has 6 inches of drop at 300.
Yeah.
So it literally, it's literally a dong length, and you can just point and click. You can, well, for some,
it depends who you're talking about, I guess.
Yeah, I guess you can, versus 8 inches with the REM mag. So you just got a greater degree of assurance for your point blank, which is important. Some people, and we, generally when we send out packages, they're zeroed at 100 yards, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But extending that zero distance out to 200-ish just gives you that point blank to 300 where, you know, you don't really have to think about it too much. And, you know, looking at, you know, the 7 Mag versus 7 Backcountry, that's a 33% improvement.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a 25% improvement over the 7 Mag, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, now let's jump to the 175.
Okay, Blake, you're going to flip them. There we go.
Okay, yeah, so this one's really interesting. This one is going to make you think. Okay. I see that there's an error on the spreadsheet. Oh, yeah,
Okay.
no, this version's wrong. My apologies. I saved over the wrong one. So the backcountry velocity with the 175 Fusion was 3,022. Sorry, 3,028.
Oh, I see. You got it at 2,800. Okay.
Yeah, my apologies, everybody. In the rush to get this, I sent the wrong.
Do you have another copy of it with you? Like,
Not
is it on
here. No, they're at
Okay,
work.
that's all right.
Yeah, so I'm sorry. I'll get them to Chuck, and then he can put them up. But
Yeah, we'll do a post. No problem.
but here's the relevant thing. Okay, so for a moment, let's forget the velocity of the 7MM Backcountry. But suffice to say, with a 175 grain projectile, the Fusion tipped, it was 3,028. Okay?
Wow.
Out of a
Crazy.
7-pound, 11-ounce gun. Now, right next to it, there's a CT Edge 28 Nosler, which was utterly state-of-the-art when this fine gentleman bought this from us. And we literally just resighted it and reshot it with the factory Nosler Trophy Grade 175 ABLR. So 26-inch barrel. And look at that velocity.
Yeah, that's wild.
Like, really
6
think
inches
about
long.
that. 6 inches less barrel, and the backcountry beats it. Doesn't come close, but like beats it by about 10%. But the big one, look at that recoil.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And that gun is just over, not quite 8.5 pounds, but close. It's a CT Edge with a 26-inch barrel. It's a thumb hole stock, so it's a heavier stock. It's got a big VX6 4-24 on it. Beautiful setup, but I shot both of them, and I'll tell you, the difference in recoil is not just small. It's freaking huge.
Yeah.
So, you know, I hate to say this, but when you're comparing, like, that is like cold and stark. You're comparing apples to apples here.
Mm-hmm.
And the efficiency of the backcountry, like mouth on the curb, stomps the 28 Nos. Now, you can hand load that up, but anybody that knows the 28 Nosler, especially like, you know, the ABLR, you know, there's kind of a hard cap on that because that bullet has such a long bearing surface and generates a lot of, you know, surface contact in the barrel, which builds pressure fast.
Yeah, for sure.
But at the end of the day, what's going to happen? You're going to put more powder in there, and the recoil is going to increase. It ain't going to decrease.
It's not going down. No, for
Nope.
sure.
So then the other one that everybody wants to see is the 7mm PRC. So, you know, very comparable rifle. That's a fierce carbon rival. You know, different stock, but very close in weight, 4 ounces separating them, using the factory 175 ELDX, and doesn't break 2700. So, you know, 20, I had it on, and I apologize everybody for screwing up that spreadsheet. That's what happens when you're rushing.
Okay.
Busy.
We'll get some notes on this in the finished.
But I just
product
want to
when
do the
we post
math
it.
on that. Just want to get the math on that. So that's
so
a
you said it
13% increase in velocity moving to the 7mm backcountry with, and this is real, like slightly less foot-pounds of energy in recoil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
So
mean,
it's
it's
meaningful.
crazy.
So unfortunately, the comparatives on the velocity on the Velo, the energy of the drop and stuff are not as meaningful. But I think you get the picture here. The big one for me was comparing, because everybody remembers the days of the 28 Nosler. I mean, we sold the bejesus out of them. Like we're selling them every day when they first came out for quite a while. It was the hot ticket, right? And it still has a place. But, you know, when you look at the difference in the case sizes, a 28 Nosler versus a 7MM Backcountry, it's pretty remarkable how much smaller the Backcountry case is.
What's
And it
the
outperforms.
what's the overall length of the cartridge? Do you know off the top of your head
Let me,
on the 7 Backcountry?
give me a sec here.
Yeah, I mean, we can come back to that. I mean, the interesting, there's a couple observations there that I think are really interesting. Like you said, the weight of the rifle itself.
So the
and
OAL is 3.34 inches.
3.3. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see the different bullet offerings, and that's where the true performance of this rifle of this caliber is going to show up in extended range, right? Like this is where it's going to really shine with some of these bullets.
Well, this is where it's really interesting. So currently Federal is producing 5 loads. They're producing the 155 terminal ascent, which you're going to see in all kinds of ammo out there, including the 7 Mag, 280 Ackley improved, and 7mm PRC. So that bullet is already being used in all of those loads. Then there's the 168 Barnes LRX, which is a monolithic copper. Then they have a 170 grain terminal ascent, which is pretty exciting because for those that don't know, the terminal ascent is essentially Federal's copy, and I mean that in the most positive way because it's a wonderful bullet of the Nosler Akubon bullet, which I consider to be overall one of the best hunting and long range bullets ever created. And then there's a 175 Fusion tipped, which that bullet has what it lacks in long range, higher grain BC. It makes up for just killing shit. That is a good hunting bullet. And you're going to see what it does to a gong at 780 yards in a few minutes here. And then they have a 180 burger coming, and they have the 195 EOL burger. So from 155 out to 195, literally like the full spectrum, 3 types of bullet compositions: frangible, bonded, and monolithic. And then they have the highest grain that you could shoot out of a 7mm currently with the 195 EOL. Haven't seen any of that ammo. I'm real curious to see what kind of velocities it puts up.
So if I'm hearing this right, Federal is the only manufacturer of ammunition at this point, but they're utilizing, like you said, 6 different bullets. So noticeable absentees on that list are going to be Nosler bullets and Hornady for probably very good reason. Do you think they're going to end up working together? Is there any scuttlebutt there?
Hard to say. I mean, it's like these companies are sometimes reluctant to go to the other's party, and I'm like, well, shit, okay, fine.
Well, look at PRC, right? Like the
Yeah.
PRC line. I mean, they're case in point, right? They do wait and wait and wait.
Nosler, they've all jumped in on it. I would love to see a 160 Akubon.
Yeah.
That's my spirit animal.
That's my spirit animal too. I mean, my story. When I built this, ordered this 284 from Alpine. I mean, I started with what bullet do I want to see hitting the animal, and it was a 160 grain Akubon. I mean, in the 7mm. I mean, I'm going to build another 7 SAUM just because I love it, but that class of bullet to me is, and it's my opinion, argue with me if you like, but that 160 grain Akubon, I mean, like you said, spirit animal.
Yeah, well, it just performs at any distance. My experience with it was in my 30 Nosler with the 180, and from 155 to 800 yards, it always, like my dad said, one shots. Like I only ever needed one shot with, he shot a 300 Weatherby all of his hunting life, and that miserable gun. But
I miss
that
talking to your dad. He's a cool little fella, man. I'm gonna have to stop in and visit him one of these days. He probably won't remember me.
So that's something interesting that no one here would understand is like, so, we always joke that, we got the 3 Gs, the groceries, the garbage, and the guns. Well, like Chuck, before I even know who Chuck was, he was dealing with my brother and my dad in the scrap recycling and garbage side, more the recycling side. And I remember one day, my brother Enver was like, "Oh, you need to talk to this guy. They're really into hunting." And we talked a little bit, we passed through, and then but then it just converged once we kind of both, I think, more like dialed into what, kind of pushed a bit of work. Well, I got more serious about this, and then you got, you decided to, kind of, I would say, become professional about, your hobby, which is a dangerous proposition, but
it is.
It's working out, wonderfully. So that's kind of funny, like just how you've known my dad and my brother for a very long time.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Enver just got out of school when I met him. Like he was just starting at the landfill. You guys had just got that contract, the recycling plant.
By school you mean his poli-sci degree?
I think so. Yeah. But I remember I sidebar, but I remember when I met your father, he basically said, you come out to the landfill and we have a chat. And we had this interesting discussion about a small discussion about recycling, and then it just immediately jumped into hunting. And before you know it, I was on my way to his house to look at his horse trailer that you guys used to camp in and hunt. And then there was the boat. Then we got gone to his his boat that he had just built for the ocean. So anyway, crazy
bit
sidebar.
Of history there. Yeah.
Bit of history. Yeah. So we have a couple questions. One of our good buddies here, Brecken Satchwell, he's a gun writer. I'm sure you've heard Brecken. He writes for a couple different publications. He's very active on the platform. He's got a couple questions. So first one, let's see. With factory ammunition, does the powder rattle in the case at all, or does it act like a compressed load when you shake it? He's detectiving here. He wants to figure out what's inside that. Do you hear anything when you shake the case, or is it compressed?
I can't say that I've heard anything.
Okay.
And I'll double check again tomorrow. Reckon I'll give it a rattle.
Interesting.
Carefully.
Yeah. Second question from Brecken. Have you shot the Federal Premium 175 ELDX loadings in a 20-inch PRC? He says
many times. Yeah. The velocity was in that chart there.
Okay. Yeah, he said the velocity is closer to the box posted than Hornady's offerings. So that's his notes.
Oh, well, okay, the Federal, okay, so it was.
Okay.
The stuff that we've had recently, there's very little difference. Like the Hornady and the Federal Premium are actually quite close. Yeah.
Okay.
They backed off on the load.
Interesting. Okay, so I want to talk for a couple minutes about bullets. You mentioned the terminal ascent bullet, which is the version, their version of the AccuBond. Yeah. Have you obviously you haven't been able to do a lot of actual hunting and killing yourself in the last couple of years just because of business life and injury.
Yeah.
But what feedback are you hearing from people that use that bullet in the field? Have you gotten some feedback from hunters back on it? Yeah. And what is that?
There's more pedaling and a bit more separation than an AccuBond. Yeah.
Okay.
Less retention.
Less retention, still gets the job done. So it kind of acts a little bit more like maybe like an ELDX as opposed to an AccuBond, or somewhere in between?
Closer to an AccuBond than an ELDX, but there's far more retention than any frangible. And by frangible, I don't care if it's an ELDX, an ELDM, a Burger Elite, a Burger VLD, a hybrid, a Target, an EOL, whatever the fuck you want to call it. It's a thin copper jacket filled with lead.
Yeah.
Okay. You can put a little divot partway down. You can put a little more copper in the ass end of it. It doesn't matter. Okay. You talk to as many people as we do that shoot bullets at different things, and they're going to tell you.
Mhm.
Okay. Frangibles do just that.
Yeah.
And the terminal is like, so imagine this is the frangible side of the spectrum. This is the monolithic side of the spectrum. These bullets, they're designed to break up. These bullets are designed to mushroom when confronted with opposing kinetic resistance.
Mhm.
Okay. What that means is if they hit bone, they break bone and they start to deform. These ones, the more resistance, the more and sooner and earlier they open up, and the less they penetrate. Okay. So this bullet is best delivered through the, in the rib cage into the organ. So it blows up. Suboptimal in a hard bony shoulder. Okay, you can
Yeah.
disagree with me all you want. That's fine. This bullet, the opposite is true. Best served into a hard bony resistant spot. That's why dangerous game guns use DGX, woodlie bullets, solid copper bullets designed to break whatever's in front of them and transmit all the kinetic energy into the mass that's in front of them. Now, kind of in the middle, closer to the monolithic, you have true bonded bullets, like a Nosler AccuBond. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say the terminal ascent is, closer to the frangible in terms of performance than it is to the monolithic.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Not entirely a bad thing. Right.
Yeah.
But it's better than, and when I say better, there's a body of hunters, call them hunters, that want to move away from frangibles because they're concerned about, what happens with poor shot placement and, spreading lead into something that they're going to consume. Simply put.
Yeah, and I think it's the whole bullet discussion. I mean, if you want to have like a wide variety of podcast listens, just search
Yeah.
up bullet discussions and go
Oh,
for a
yeah.
16-hour drive, and you will hear everybody's opinion.
Yeah.
It's like an asshole. Everybody's got one, right? And personally, just I grew up as a kid with my father and my uncle. And I don't know if it was because all we could get our hands on was a Nosler partition, but that's what we loaded and shot for
One of the
years
best
and
hunting
years and
bullets.
years.
So for a 400 yard or less hunting bullet,
Yeah.
pretty much impossible to beat the partition.
Yeah, in my opinion. Again, I always preface these discussions with that because, it could be argued. In the last 10 years, I haven't strayed a lot from the Nosler AccuBond. When that AccuBond came out, my rifle of choice in those days was, this is going back 30 years or so when it first came out. It was a 264 Winchester Magnum, and I was shooting 140 grain partitions, and then load developed into the 140 grain AccuBond, and just killed a lot of things with that particular combination.
Yeah.
And then I started to jump into, my kids all got in the 6.5 Creedmoors. That's what I trained them in. And there was a plethora of ELDX handler or factory ammo out there, and it was everywhere. And that's what I shot them with. And I saw a variety of results with those bullets.
Yeah.
And then last year, as you know, I bought that wonderful Gunworks in 300 PRC 20-inch barrel. And yeah, there's some felt recoil there too, and some muzzle jump, and all kinds of fun things. But downrange, it's the hammer of Thor, that gun. If I want something to die, like real quick. But I tried the hammer bullets in a hand load with that. And I shot 2 animals with the 300 PRC, and I think it's the 192 grain. I think 182 or 192. I can't remember now off the top of my head. 3,100 feet a second. And it killed him. It killed him like stone cold dead. But there was a lot going on inside that wound channel in both cases. In the case of my goat, I have a video that's on the platform here somewhere, and I've shared it. That goat looks like it was struck by lightning at 100 or 400 yards and hit him in the central nervous system and shut the lights off. But Ed and I, you could just feel when you touched the front end of that goat, it was like a bowl of Jello. Yeah,
destroyed.
yeah. So I'm going to stick with what I know and love, and that is the Accubon.
Yeah.
So, okay, one of the let's circle back to what you may or may not know about the potential new chamberings that are coming. You mentioned a few of them there. Do you have an idea what's coming next? Is there any scuttlebutt on that? Any kind of a announcements or anything?
Yeah, so like, if a little bird was to land on my shoulder, it would probably say that the 300 is going to show up in the fall. And then we'll see like a 6.5 for SHOT Show next year.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say those are highly likely. And then a 22, because like souped up 22s are huge. 22
That's
NOS,
the rage
22
now.
more. Yeah. And then I would say it's kind of the reintroduction of the 338 Federal. It'd be the 338 Backcountry.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So we'll see how it does, right? I mean, the big thing right now here in Canada is ammunition. That's what everybody's concerned about. Everyone's kind of like, ooh, because I still have people asking me, is the 7 PRC going to stick around? I'm like, yeah, I think so. I think it's going to stick around for sure, just like the 6.5 and the 300. Like they've nailed it with those.
Well, I mean, honestly, and until it's proven otherwise, in my opinion, once again, I think the 7 Backcountry for the near future is going to be a factory ammunition caliber. I'm still skeptical on the hand loading. Like, there's just so many things to unpack, right? Like, and I know Garrick would agree with me. It's like this is not a hand loader's caliber, and now, at least for sure, it's not. I just don't think it will be for a while until they really get it figured out. And that 7 PRC, that thing checks so many boxes. Like, it's a great caliber, right?
And you can hop it up. Like, again, like we're looking at factory ammunition, and there's been complaints that the factory offerings are fairly anemic. I can explain why that is. A lot of people probably don't understand why, and maybe they don't want to know, but it has a lot to do with quality chambering. And, we saw at least 100 feet per second deficit when we burned through the initial lots that we had, and then got like new stuff, and they backed it off because people were experiencing heavy bolt lift and like a click and fails to extract and things like that. Similar to what we saw with the 28 Nosler, but not as extreme. But, if you have a quality chamber, like a custom, for example, and you have really good brass, like ADG brass, I mean, hell, we sell Snowy Mountain rifles, and Paul, he loads stuff like volcano hot. Like, we're talking like 20-inch barrel, 180 grain burger, just about 2,900 feet per second, that's fast. So it's there. But again, we're talking factory loads, right? How do you get, this is giving someone, a certain level of performance with factory ammunition.
Yeah, no, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about the availability of factory ammo, because if anybody's going to have it, Precision Optics is going to have it. So what's sitting on the pallets today?
Right now, so we've got a lot of the 168 LRX. Okay.
That's a good bullet.
It's a great bullet, and it seems to be shooting well. So we have a healthy supply of that, and there's more coming. As for the other 4 loads, I don't know. There's lots of it in the U.S. There's lots of ammo in the U.S., and it's getting pipelined up here. So it's kind of like when the 6.5 PRC came out. Like, we had certain types, and with the 300 PRC, we only had the 212 sold out, and we had the 225 for the longest time. Now there's more of a normalization, and I'm hoping that it catches and the distributors load up on the other offerings. The ones that I'm most interested in personally are the 170 terminal ascent, the 168 LRX, and the 175 fusion tipped. Those are the three that I wish I had on the shelf for testing and just to give a little bit of variety. The 195 EOL, yeah, it's interesting, but what are you going to do with that thing? Really?
Yeah. Exactly.
And the 155, I'm curious to see what the velocity would be. I'm sure it better be like fast, but again, you're shooting at 284 for a reason, and you should sort of be in that 160, 170 zone with these new calibers.
I think
so that's kind of my perspective on it. But all indications are that distributors are pulling it in because it's selling. When I pulled from two distributors, and they were both like, okay, you can't have that much, but we're going to give you a fair bit.
Yeah.
Right. So that means they're trying to allocate to everybody, and that's good. I don't just want me to have it. I want it available all over the place, because then people won't be so concerned about buying the gun.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, one of the things you hit there, I think the nail on the head. I always kind of look at caliber, diameter, and optimal bullet choice for said caliber.
Yeah.
Right. So if you look in that 6.5 class, if you're shooting at whether it's a 6.5 Creedmoor, or a 6.5 PRC, or 264, or 6.5 by 55, I mean, the bullet that jumps out and everybody shoots is a 140 grain bullet, or 130, 140, somewhere in there. And sure, you want to. I went through this a little bit with load development on my 284 Winchester, just looking again back at Nosler, looking at the performance, the BC between a 284 140 grain versus a 284 160 grain bullet. I mean, the 160 grain just wins in all counts, right? From BC to downrange performance, everything. And I think with this, for me, that the 7 Backcountry, if I was buying one, I kind of like that 165, like 160 to 175 grain range. I think is going to be just
agreed,
like thunder downrange, right?
For sure.
We got a couple more questions, Omer. Clay is asking for your sheep hunt this year. I mean, the man with so many choices. It looks like I know this choice was made a long time ago because I talked to you about this rifle.
Yeah.
What's your package looking like this year? Sorry, let me rephrase that. What is your rifle and scope combo? What is your rifle combination scope looking like here? Like, what are you taking?
So this year I'm packing an 18-inch 7 SOM, and it's shooting the 168 Burger right at 2,700 feet per second. And I ordered that gun quite a while ago, and then it showed up end of October of last year, and I was like, and it's kind of a long story. We'll get into the why of that gun when we do the pack
Thursday show.
Yeah. It was strictly a very indulgent, I'm going to cut a little bit of weight off my gun situation, right? But I scoped it up with again, I'm a spoiled brat. I get to play with what I want to. I put the new Zeiss V8 2.8 to 20 NA on it. So it's a reintroduction of the Zeiss V8 scope for North America. It's got 30 mil tube. It's got like close to 100 MOA of adjustment. It's an incredible scope, and it should be. It's very indulgent, but I'll tell you what, it's got a hefty price tag. But we sell a fair number of them when people actually get behind it and feel, get the feel of it and look through it, take it outside. They're just like, holy smokes. Like, it literally has everything with no bullshit. There's no, So that's the system. It's the most accurate gun I've ever owned, and probably legitimately one of the most accurate guns that I've shot. I received it. I was, trying to figure out what scope to put on it. We played with a whole bunch. We got one of these NAs in. Jackson was pretty excited. I'm like, okay, well, let's crack the seal on one. My first choice for a scope, actually, it's a heavy scope, and it ended up bringing me over the threshold I wanted. So I abandoned that. And then we put everything on the scale, and I was like, wow, okay, that's what I want. Right? Like 7.5 pounds.
Perfect.
And we scoped it up, and during a dial-in in November, took it to the range, and I tested the Gunworks loads out of it, and it was like, okay, which one? Like they literally all were like sub half. Yeah. Well, short barrels. People ask me all the time, these short barrels, are they accurate? Like, actually, they're more accurate. Like they tend to group tighter because they're more rigid. There's less barrel whip, right?
Yeah.
And I went with the 168 Burger because we all like Ben shoots that, Jackson shoots that. We all shoot 7 SOMs. And so,
nice.
I would use the backcountry in a heartbeat. I would.
Yeah.
I've thought about it. I was
going to say, if there was a do-over card here and you knew then what you knew now.
If they were building one, they're holding on. Gunworks is holding off on building one because they want to load with a certain projectile which isn't available yet, and they can't do it. They got to wait for federal to do it. Okay. But I have thought about taking, and we do stuff like this. We have Gunworks climber stocks, and they're the most ergonomic stock out there, and taking like a Fierce and dropping it in that stock, which is easy to do. It's a REM 700 footprint. But listen, I've bonded with this rifle a bit. It's, when you hit the point with a rifle where you feel, I used to do this with archery, I would practice. And then as we got closer to go time, I shot less and less with that bow because I just felt good about it. And Jack will be like, so you're going to bring your gun? I'm like, I don't need to. He's like, oh, okay, yeah, right. But it's true. Like I don't need to do anything with that gun. I will now because we're a month out, but I feel good about it. So that's the gun I'm packing. But
sweet.
What would I like? Let's look at it from another angle. If I wasn't a dealer and didn't get to play with whatever I wanted, what would I consider? Value wise and performance, I would bring it down to like a Fierce Rogue, okay, in a 7 PRC or a 7 Backcountry with a Zeiss Conquest V4, which is a very common build that we do.
Yeah, very common.
Yeah, that the V4 is an incredible scope for the money. So Fierce Carbon Rogue 2850. Zeiss Conquest V4 is like $18.99. That's an incredible combination there of performance.
Yeah, it really is, and those scopes are so nice.
They're
not the lightest, but they are certainly durable, reliable, and that glass.
It's a Night Force. The guts of it are a Night Force. A lot of people don't know that. The erector system, a lot of the design is shared from Night Force, so that's a good thing. Yeah.
Oh, we have one more question here before I don't want to lose it here. Rob Clunes is asking what the lower velocity limits for reliable expansion with the LRX. So minimum impact velocity, I guess. Do you know off the top of your head? Is it 1,700, 1,800 feet?
That's a good rule of thumb, right?
That's
yeah. Like if you adhere to that, but again, shot placement. So I don't care what velocity it is. If you hit it high in the rib cage, it's going to pinhole right through. Okay, I've seen it with my own eyes. Okay, so so let's be honest here. If you're shooting a monolithic high BC bullet, so it's got a high sectional density, which means it has a high predictive value of penetration. That's something that's 700-800 yards away. Where do you want to hit it? In the shoulder plate. Okay, so you've now taken a broadside like this. Generally you want to aim center of mass. Well, now you're going to be aiming here, right?
Yeah.
You've like decreased your chance of a shot because, you aim here, whatever your variance is and, your, like you may have a 0.5 MOA rifle and it may shoot 0.5 MOA, but what do you shoot under conditions of duress or stress? 1.5, 2? So 700 yards, 2 MOA is 14 inches.
So
So
do you listen? Do you ever listen to the Modern Day Sniper podcast at all? Those guys from the States, yeah,
A little bit.
it's
There's so much to
interesting.
take in. Yeah.
There's a lot. There's a lot there, and they talk about this. But I'm just wrapping up a video that I'm going to release here on this 284, and in that video, I've got a clip of shooting in the wind because I was out load testing one day out to range. You know, out my max range for I built that rifle 600 yards and in was really what I built it for. You know, like that's my limit, my personal limit. I'm not going to try and kill the sheep at 900 yards or anything like that. But as the day went on, I was shooting for 5 or 6 hours, and the wind started to pick up, and it was a left-right wind. And at the end of the day, at 600 yards, the wind was like I had flagging tape on my gong, and it was pointing pretty much straight sideways, right at 600 yards. And so, I had the bullet drop dialed, no problem. And I started to see, okay, what's this wind doing? Because I'm curious too. 160 grain AccuBond leaving the barrel at 2850. What's it going to do downrange? How's it going to buck the wind? I kid you not. It took 2 shots to hit that gong 10-inch plate, but I was aiming probably 7 feet left of the gong to hit it in that wind. And so, I caution people, when they're looking at, the range, too many people, this is a rabbit hole, too many people miss and underestimate what that wind is doing between the end of that barrel and the target animal on the other end. It's incredible what wind does. Like, you don't know till you try. It is the enemy. It's impossible to read. You can kestrel the shit out of it, but you're standing behind the rifle and you're running your kestrel, and that wind could have an unlimited amount of variation between you and the target, right? Like it's just pure roll the dice. So
speaking of hitting gongs.
Yes, gongs. Let's show Blake. Pull up a couple videos there.
Just a preface to that. So I was scheduled to do a podcast with Dev and Kurt on Come Out Heavy. And I said, okay, well, before we do this, I wanted Kurt to shoot the backcountry. And Kurt's busy, and he's a very busy guy. He's got a young family, but I had everything ready for him, and he whipped up to the range, and we were setting up guns for customers, and I had a couple of backcountries there. And so he shows up, and I'm just finishing him off, getting the ballistics figured out, chronographing them. And I said, okay, well, here, shoot this one. And it was a 7 backcountry with a Veracity PH. And I explained I explained the scope to him. And we did a video for Instagram. And, funnily enough, he called it the Veracity HP. And so, the joke was, it's the HP sauce. And so it's amazing because people have literally like texted and they're like, I want the HP sauce,
Oh, nice.
And so then we were at the 500-meter range. And then we jumped over to the 780 range, and I put one of the guns in front of him. It's got a Zeiss Conquest V4, and he hasn't shot that gun before. So I dialed the turret for the ballistics, and what you're looking at is like a standard IPSC target. He'd never shot at the 780-yard range. Kurt is the first to tell you that he's not a quote-unquote shooter. He doesn't shoot as much as he would like. So if you watch that left target, this was cold bore with the 175 Fusion out of a gun he hadn't shot before. Go ahead. That's 780 yards.
Hit! That's a good hit.
Wow.
So pretty close, like that is.
Hit! That's a good hit.
Pretty darn close to center for that distance. But what's impressive is the splat mark that Fusion does.
Like, oh shit! What was your? Do you remember what your MO8 dial-up was for that?
I don't.
Yeah. Just interesting, man. It's just a hammer, hey. Wow.
Yeah, and then the next video is his follow-up shot.
Okay, let's try that one.
Splat.
So
yeah. That's flat, man.
Splat.
So horizontally perfect, just a little bit higher, and that's less than 6 inches. So he's well
Yeah.
under an MOA from each other.
You think
So
about it too, like for a non-shooter, like not a
Mhm.
non-shooter, but a pro shooter, like a human hair difference in your crosshair. I can't remember what
Yeah.
the number is, but it's ridiculous. It's like a half inch at 100 yards or something. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like,
yeah. 10,000 translates into almost 1 inch at 100.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's, again, back to practicing and knowing your rifle. But here's a guy walks in, jumps out of his truck, probably on the cell phone with his wife till he pulled in the parking lot, jumps behind that gun and puts 2 right in the pocket. Like, nice shooting. Crazy.
Yeah, I was so so you can imagine how it is when I like badger him to come to the range, put him
Yeah.
behind a gun he hasn't shot before, and then like put him under the pressure. It's just me, him, and Jackson. But still, like we're friends. Like, and he's, if he misses, I'm gonna ride him till the cows come
Sure.
home. But then
Exactly.
then he smokes it, and then he does it again. Like,
Yeah, that's awesome.
pretty happy with that.
So Clay's asking again, what was the scope and magnification again on that?
That was just
rifle?
a Zeiss Conquest V4 4-16 by 44, 16 power.
16 power.
Yeah, nothing. Like, I say this, like tongue in cheek, but nothing fancy.
Mhm.
We got like, you got Night Force NX8s that go to 32 power. We got like all kinds of scopes that go way over 20, right? And that's just like but it honestly, and he saw his hits. That
Mhm.
was the cool thing.
That
It
is
was like,
cool.
holy fuck, I hit it. Like, whoa,
Yeah.
And if you heard,
Exactly.
you don't quite get it in a video, but that's why
Yeah.
Jack's like, that was a good hit. Like, it was like whomp, right? Jack's
Yeah.
used to shooting frangibles. Like, we shoot frangibles. Like, for goat and sheep, I'm okay with burgers or ELDMs or ELDXs, right? It's
Mhm.
larger game that I'm a little aversive to them. But when we shoot the gongs, it don't make a noise like that.
Yeah.
Like, those bullets just splatter. That bullet was kind of telling fuck you to that gong.
Yeah. I'm here. Say hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun. Optics are an interesting component to the whole thing too. And I bought the scope from you, but on my little sheep rifle, I've got that new Z5 2-10 by 42.
Z5
And
Plus.
the Z5 Plus, yeah. And I'm smacking 10-inch plate, 650 yards, and
Yep.
it's that plate is about almost the same size as the crosshair in the middle, right? Like it's tiny, but you cannot underestimate clear optics, though. As my point, like a clear scope.
So it's funny. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you there, but I do have quite a few people that are now moving to like the 2-10, the 2-12 for a couple of reasons. The higher zoom, the more parallax comes into play, and the more you have to tune for it and field of view.
Yeah.
Right. You're
Field
watching
of view
everything
is
happen.
crazy.
You're watching shit happen. You're like ping, or you miss, you see and that's a journey that I had to, I kind of 338 in the Put. I had an ultralight 30 Nosler with a 5-30 Swarovski Z6, and I'm pulling the trigger and I'm not seeing what's happening, and I'm solo hunting goats. And then I was like, yeah, that's enough. But
I was just going to say, and one of the reasons I chose that scope, there was many, but in the case of the Swaro, having that MOA turret and a 30 mil tube now to be able to, I mean, it's got way more, MOA. It's got a lot of adjustment, more than I'll ever need. But my thought process was interesting because I looked at it and I was like, okay, I'm mounting this on a 4.5-pound rifle. I thought in my mind, I'm never going to be able to see impact. So I better get better field of view downrange. So I can at least see something, right? Guys, a little bit of compensation. Yeah. And the trade-off is I don't have 14, 16 power, but I mean, there's lots of sheep hunters out there that, old school guys that used to run 6 powers, like there's get closer if you can.
And their Stetson and their cowboy boots.
And the blue jeans and the dip.
With their bottle of whiskey. Yeah. And they
we've
didn't
heard it
bring
all.
food. They just brought chew.
Isn't
Yeah.
that your dad? That was what he would do. He'd tough it out. All right. So I have I just want to hear your summary, pros and cons on the 7 Backcountry. Pros. Obviously, we just spent an hour and a half.
We'll do the
talking
cons
about it,
first, get the negative over first. So cons are for reloaders and for variety and ammunition.
Mhm.
Okay. The pros are, flatter, more kinetic energy downrange, more efficient with your ballistic compensating system, but actually preferable recoil pulse to a lot of stuff. Better than pretty much any Magnum that I've shot. And I'm not alone. This isn't just me. If you put that shit in Google, it's going to tell you that the recoil pulse gives a perception of less recoil. Perception matters. Okay, so you have a better shooting experience overall.
Mhm. Well said. I would agree. I think again, I think there's a place for this gun, and there's going to be a place for all the existing chamberings. Not all, but the majority of existing chamberings and the new ones we've seen in the last few years.
Yeah.
The PRC line. I don't think it's going anywhere. The 300 PRC might have a little trouble stacking up against the 300 Backcountry.
We'll see how what it does. Yeah, because I'll tell you
see.
something. They'll probably use better bullets for hunting.
Yeah.
You might see like
Cool.
a 250 AccuBond or something like a 225 or 235 or something, or a Terminal Ascent, right? The Terminal Ascent 200 grain is an awesome bullet. So, yeah.
So, what do you have in stock for rifles right now?
Lots fierce in every model.
Okay.
And, I would have Weatherbees and I would have Savages, but our darn government and these tariffs are kind of an impediment. Fierce is the only manufacturer that's stepped up and is absorbing the lion's share of the tariff. So that people understand what's going on. So back in February, early March, Canadian government, in response to the US government tariffs that it was placing on many countries, the Canadian government came out with a 25% retaliatory tariff on a long list of US origin goods. So what does that mean? What that means is when the product clears through customs, if it falls on an HS code that is affected by that, the government applies a 25% direct tariff on it. So if it costs you $1,000, it now costs you $1,250. Okay.
Nice.
And then you have to adjust your retail accordingly. And in fact, to retain as a retailer, say you want to make 20% on something. Well, you don't just increase your retail by 25%. You actually have to increase it by a bit more to retain that same 20% margin. So if you're looking at Weatherby, for example, they're chambering the 7MM Backcountry, but you look at like their Backcountry. That's a cool thing. It's possible to buy a Weatherby Mark V 7MM Backcountry because they make a Backcountry.
You go
rifle.
twice.
Did you stutter?
Backcountry all the time.
Called the 7MM Stutter.
Nice.
So those guns, they naturally cost around $5,000. Well, do you want to pay like 25% more, like $6,250 in that ballpark? Short answer is like F no. So there's been almost nothing come across the border. Savage has some good offerings, but at the price point that the Savage is, offered, 25% like bumps it into a comfortable zone. So the distributors don't want to bring it in. John, we had discussions on this, and I worked with Rob Dykeman, our Canadian, he manages Fierce Canada. And I gave him some fancy spreadsheets, and then they're like, okay, well, we'll absorb like at least half the tariff. So the impact on the cost was minimal. So we're able to bring in their guns. We just had another big pallet show up this last week, and I think Jack's almost put them all up on the website. So we have the 7MM Backcountry in the Rogue, the Rival, the Rage, and the Reaper in all their models.
Okay.
The best value by far is what's called the Fierce Twisted Rogue.
Mhm.
So that's a spiral fluted match grade barrel, stainless steel action, carbon fiber stock, and it's $2,510, which
Wow.
it's quite good. Like, like a special edition Tika these days is around $1,900, right?
Yeah.
And you're getting, exotic calibers, carbon fiber stock, and all that good stuff.
Mhm.
So I would have more offerings, but they just they're not available at a reasonable price.
It'll happen. It'll happen.
Oh yeah,
But one of the cool things I like about precision optics, not necessarily personally for me, but I've experienced it too, with a couple of guns from you, is you're one of the few shops where someone can order a rifle. Like, let's say, and this I wouldn't recommend to anybody, but let's say you have the last minute decision. You're going to go north and you're going to go on a hunt. Buddy phones you. His buddy broke a leg, can't go on a hunt. You don't have a rifle. You could pick up the phone, call you or Jack and say, hey, I need a 7 Backcountry and I need it dialed in. And I need to stop in Quesnel on my way up and fire a box of shells at the range with you, and then continue on my, once in a lifetime sheep hunt with my buddy. That is a doable thing that can happen with you guys. And I don't know anywhere else where you can actually get that done, right? Like, it's not recommended, but
yeah, we've done it. I've done it. I've, literally dropped everything, zipped out to the range, and driven far north to meet like an outfitter because the client lost a rifle. Yeah. I've done that.
Sure.
I've had people stop in here all rattled, and I can't do it all the time, but take him out to the range and get him sorted out and on his way. And then, 7 to 10 days later, I get a text with, hero picture, and that's, that's pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It is.
And we have literally done 1-day turnarounds, which I don't particularly like, but we have done that. Like, literally we get the call, and and me or Garrick, we're bombing out to the range and dialing in like that one gun and getting it ready to go. Now, I don't recommend that, but usually we like 2 weeks. We like to do them in batches, and we do them, we turn them around in 2 weeks.
Right on.
And then we do the best to support them that we can. We warranty a number of the rifles that we sell directly. Andy does our warranty work, and then we try to problem solve them. And sometimes people are shy. They buy a system and they're like, something's not going right, or they don't let us know. Or once in a while you get someone who does try to let you know, but their pride gets in the way. We try to manage that, and we do what we can. It's hard. We average 10 systems a week at least through the year.
Yeah.
Like, we're shooting in the winter. Garrick is out there
year round. Yeah.
So that's a lot, and we don't have a huge staff. I mean, we have a lot of people in our company in all the various arms, but we don't have a lot of people in precision optics because, quite frankly, people call us because we know stuff. It's hard to train people in this industry and pay them, because the margins are actually really abysmal. Talk to any store owner, they'll tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
But we do what we can.
Right on. Well, you know what? We have about 7 minutes left, so I'm going to start the wrap here. But the great news is we got you again on Thursday. We're going to have 2 hours of sort of unpacked with Omer. This will be fun. I'm looking forward to it. We have 2 pieces of business to take care of before we shut down for tonight. Blake drew the winner while I was while we were chatting here, but tonight we're giving away what we call our Mountain Fuel bundle from 3 of our partners. This is Coffee, Wilderness Athlete, and Trail Fair Foods. You're getting a little sample pack, and that winner is David Winger. So David, I'll get that out to you. It's going to take me a couple weeks because I'm out of town. So nice work. You're going to love all 3. And we had one of our members, I think it was Sheldon, was asking. Who was asking from Alberta, Blake? Oh yeah,
Sheldon. Yep.
So I'm going to tease you guys a little bit here. It's a good time. to be a Spike Camp member for the next, well, boy, for this entire hunting season, we are doing some pretty amazing giveaways for sheep season, our sheep camp series coming up. There's going to be an opportunity to win a rifle. And then shortly after that, you will have an opportunity throughout the rest of the hunting season to win this rifle that Omer is holding up for us, generously donated by Precision Optics. Tell us what we have there, my friend.
Well, Bob.
Well, Bob,
trying to do my best prices right. One of the.
Yes.
So this is a Fierce Carbon Rogue in 7MM Backcountry. It's in the Carbon Trophy with Black Cerakote model. It's topped with one of my. So we can talk about this, next go here. But it's topped with a Burris Veracity PH 3-15 by 42. I'm a huge fan of the technology in this style of scope, and in particular, what these scopes bring to the table. And happy to talk about that, in the pack dump, because I think it's relevant. But some lucky mofo is going to win this rig. When, Chuck?
We're going to probably run this one in September, I think. We've got one in the pipeline already. There's going to be a gun given away in August in conjunction with Sheep Camp. This is going to happen probably in September. We're going to work out the details. But I will say this. If you support conservation and you are a Spike Camp member, you will have a chance to win this rifle. So details will follow. So there's your teaser, folks. And Omer, thank you very much for your support. I mean, it's fantastic. You do so much for conservation and the hunting and everything in that space. And, on behalf of all the members of Spike Camp, we really appreciate you and Wild Sheep as well. So thanks for taking the time this week. I know you're super busy. And we will see you Thursday, same place, same time, and we'll do some pack dumping. How's that sound?
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody. Have a good night. Tune in Thursday night and be safe. Thank you.